Hello there, lovely folks of YouTube. Ren here. So today going to be a longer video in several parts probably. I want to talk about the task that I usually do in the garden starting around midsummer and going for a couple months afterwards, and that is my herb harvest. So, or herb, as you may say in Britain. We don't pronounce the H here in the United States, but silent H. But anyway, so I usually wait until midsummer to harvest, simply because that's when most of my plants are at their full growth. You want to make sure that you get lots of growth on your plants before you really harvest them, just so that you can get the maximum yield from it. A lot of the times, if you do it at this time of year also, the plants will then put out some secondary growth that you could possibly get a second harvest, depending on what the plant is. This plant right here, this is what I'm going to start with. This is my chamomile. This is Roman chamomile specifically, which is the Anthemis nobilis. This is a perennial chamomile. Usually when you buy chamomile in stores, it will tend to be the German chamomile, which is the annual chamomile, simply because that chamomile stands a little bit taller and is easier to harvest with the machine. This plant needs to be harvested by hand. So, now, some of the caveats on this. This is the reason why I've had to wait until now to do my harvest, is because you cannot do any harvesting of your plants while it's wet or rainy, or even if there's dew on the plants. You want the plants to be as dry as possible, otherwise they will just mildew and mold and spoil when you try to dry them. The ideal time of day is a nice sunny, dry day. It's really sunny and really hot today, which is why my hair is up. But sunny, dry day, ideally in the early morning after the dew has evaporated, but that's that early morning time before the sun has really reached full potency is not only more comfortable for you, but also better for the plants. The plants will have their highest concentrations of those essential oils without it having been burned off by the sun. So, small plants like this, the chamomile, I'm really just harvesting the flowers on this plant. I'm leaving the rest of it, and you can, I don't know if you can see, but like there are some spots in here where if I were to cut the entire tops off, I would be losing some of these unopened flower buds. So that's why I want to focus on just the flowers themselves. This is a very time-consuming task when you're harvesting these little flowers like this. This is a really good time for, I consider it to be sort of a moving meditation, really. This is the time that I'm really interacting with the plant and connecting with the plant in its most sacred way. Plus you just get that really nice aroma of the plant just kind of surrounding you, and just, it's really, this is for me the best way to connect with my plants, is when I actually interact with this. I do try to give back to my plants when I harvest from them, which is usually just a little sprinkling of water in most cases. I'm not watering them because they've already received a lot of water. The ground is very wet, but I might give them a little sprinkling of compost. Some places that you'll see on the internet will recommend like a little sprinkling of tobacco as a gift. I have mixed feelings about that because I feel like that's probably a pretty appropriate practice from Native American practices, various tribal practices here in the United States. I prefer to just give compost because that's something that I've put work and effort into to create that will also help the growth of the plant. So, now, part of the thing when you harvest as well is you're also going to need some way to dry these plants. Now, with little plants like this, the chamomile, since I'm just pulling the flower heads off, you can't do the traditional way where you hang the bundles to dry them. So this is my very low-key and simple solution. This is literally just a brown paper lunch bag. You can use any kind of brown paper bag. And this is where I'm going to put my flower heads into. That way they will stay dark and dry, but also because the paper is porous, we'll get good air circulation. And just like once a day or so, you can just kind of shake the bag in order to make sure that the flowers aren't sticking together. Harvesting process is very simple. I'm literally just going to take one hand and just pinch right under the flower head and it'll pop right into my other hand, or onto my lap, as that one did. Sometimes when the flowers are a little older, the stems are tougher and you need a little extra work. These are older flowers because, again, I haven't been able to harvest because it's been raining. But that's basically it. I'm just popping the flowers right off. And then once I get a good handful, into the bag they go. And yes, as I'm doing this, I'm getting that aroma of the chamomile flowers just rising all around me. It actually, after a while, it can get a little bit overwhelming. Ooh, this one's really tough. There we go. So, with the chamomile, ideally, I'm looking for flowers that still have the rays or the petals still kind of standing straight out. So, I don't know. I'll pull this one off so you can see it. So something like this one, where the rays have kind of fallen down a little bit, that one's a little too old. So we're going to just set that one aside. But as long as those petals are still standing straight out at full attention, then it is ready for harvest. And this is something that's probably going to take me a good, looking at how many flowers are here, a good 20 or 30 minutes. And since I don't want to make a 2-hour long video, I'm probably going to cut this part short right here. And the next time you see me, we'll be moving on to another plant. You are very big. Look at you. Hey, so here I am, getting right in the midst of my mugwort plant. This definitely needs to be harvested. Very, very tall. So, a couple tools I use for this one. I have a basket. That is just to kind of hang on to the branches as I'm harvesting them. You don't need to invest a lot of money into this. This is a basket I got at a thrift store for 75 cents. Look how pretty that is. Isn't that a nice basket? Definitely check out your local thrift stores. You can find a wealth of witchy tangential things there. So, along with my basket, I also have a pair of gardening scissors. I've had these for years and years. Traditionally, like if you're looking at traditional Wiccan practice, the traditional tool for this would be the boline, or the white-handled knife. I don't have one of those. I just use scissors, and that's fine, because we're very practical. I also have some lengths of twine. These are old lengths that I've just recycled year after year, because I love to reuse things when I can. And that's going to be to tie up the bundles once I've harvested them. But I'm going to show you how we go about doing this. So with my mugwort, very tall mugwort, what I'm going to go for is I'm going to cut it right above one of these little leaf nodes. So that gives me a little length of stem without any leaves on it. And that way I can tie it together where those stems don't have any leaves. Nice long length there. This is probably going to be too big to hang in my kitchen unless I cut it into smaller pieces. I might have to put it in my shed. But that's just going to go right in my basket for now while I get another one. So, and where I cut these, the mugwort plant, it will then send up new growth along that base. I honestly don't need to harvest a lot of this mugwort because I still have plenty from last year. Most of what I'm harvesting is probably just going to be gifted to my friends, grove mates. There we go. This is a nice bushy one. Look at all that. And you can see it was already starting to send up a lot of side growth. It's now going to do that at an accelerated pace below where I cut it away. This one, yeah, you're going to need to be cut, if for no other reason than just to keep you from getting too tall. There we go. That is more than I need to make a bundle. So I'll probably come back and harvest some more of these in a little bit. But let me move out of this way here. This is kind of awkward, but actually, let me reposition my camera. There we go. That's a little better. So, these bundles of mugwort here. So like I said, you can take... Now at this point when I harvest them, this is usually when I'm inspecting them and just removing any just brown or discolored or bug-eaten leaves and growth on them so that I don't accidentally mix them in with the dried product, because it's a lot harder to separate it out once it's dried. If you give it just a little quick look over when it's fresh, then you can avoid having all that yuck mixed in once you dry it. Here we go. Got the stems here at the top with minimal leaves. I'm going to take my little piece of twine. Now I have this twine tied in a slip knot at the end. So you can see that that little piece will just move freely, like almost like a lasso. And I'm just going to loop it over and then pull it tight. And I do the slip knot because as it dries, it will shrink and loosen up. And that way you can just continually tighten it as it's dried and not have to worry about your plant material slipping out of the bundle. And that's it. That's now ready to hang to be dried. So probably going to move inside for the next step, which is to show you how to garble your herbs, which is basically just stripping the leaves off of the stems for harvest. Because it is too hot out here. I am just sweating. I need a break. Let's go inside. Okay, so I wanted to do just a really quick segue before I show you the next part. To show you one of my little herb drying racks here. This is actually a combination storage and drying rack where I have my most commonly used herbs that I use mostly for personal just drinking and enjoyment. This is a custom shelf that was built specifically for this space by my husband and has a little herb drying rack here at the bottom. You'll see it in the background, so I figured I was just going to curtail any questions that you may have about it and show it to you really quick. I do have 5 little bundles here that are in the process of drying here. Just going from left to right here, we have thyme, calamint, peppermint, yarrow, and then this big boy right here is lemon balm, because I always have a ton of lemon balm. And then a lot of those will end up going into these jars here, which I do have. They're labeled, of course, but it's a visual label, which is a nice little learning tool to help you identify the plants. This is more so for the kids than for me. So they're actively learning what these plants look like and what they're used for based on their appearance rather than their name. So anyway, I just wanted to show that really quick. This is an ideal place for drying them because it's fairly cool and dry during the summertime. Of course, we have the air conditioning running, which keeps it nice and dry in the house, keeps that humidity out, but also it is out of direct sunlight, which is another key factor for drying your herbs. You don't want to have them in direct sunlight because, again, that sunlight can sort of burn away some of those aromatics and essential oils that we want to preserve in the plant as much as possible. When you do, of course, package your plant material, you want to keep it in a fairly airtight jar, which is what I have here as well. These jars are all hermetically sealed. These are very, very frugally obtained jars. These are actually just upcycled candle jars. So anyway, let's move on to the actual process of garbling the herbs. Okay, so here we are in my kitchen. Different day, different outfit, same work, because this is not something that can be done in just one day. I'm getting ready to garble my herbs here. Garbling is very old-fashioned word, and it basically just means the process of stripping away the things that are unneeded in order to preserve just those things that you want to keep. So I'm going to actually work with my spearmint here because that is ready to be processed. So I have it here in a basket. My work surface, I'm actually using just an aluminum cookie sheet with a little rim on it. That's because it gives me a nice clean surface, and also anything that happens to fall, I can then easily retrieve it to keep that with rather than losing it. I want to make sure I have one of my jars here. As you can see, it's empty. Kids have gone through it, so I need to refill this jar definitely. And then I have my spearmint over here in my basket. That's just where I happen to put it because that was the convenient thing to hold it in the meantime. I have it in a paper towel, which I'm actually going to use as well in addition to the cookie sheet for work surface, because this is a little bit easier to lift and dump material into my jar than the cookie sheet itself. So cookie sheet is sort of like a last resort to make sure that I don't lose things, but the towel is going to be the main workhorse here. So I'm going to set aside most of this and just tease out one little stem at a time. And the process of garbling, the other thing, should have mentioned this, make sure you have clean hands when you do this as well. I just washed my hands not too long ago, so that way I'm not introducing things from my hands into the herbs that I want to preserve. Most herbs like this, with the very large leaves and the very sturdy stems, you can literally just kind of go in the direction of the growth and just kind of strip it down this way. And as you can see, those leaves come right off and just leave the naked stem, which I will set aside. I'm going to try and keep as much of this whole as possible and just get it into my jar. There's a few little stem pieces there that were still in my fingers. The reason I don't crush them immediately is, again, the more surface area you have exposed, the more you're going to lose some of those really volatile, fragrant compounds that we want to preserve. So I try to keep it whole for as long as possible. It's usually right before I use the herbs that I then will crush them in my mortar and pestle. So, and again, just continuing on with the next one. There we go. Into the jar. And you can see my little bits that have fallen onto the paper towel. This makes it very easy because I can literally just do one of these numbers right, just like that. Hang on, I probably should make sure that's on camera there. So yeah, take my paper towel with the material inside it. If you want to do something that's reusable, like one of those silicone cutting mats would work really well for this as well. And sometimes things get a little tricky to separate out, and I make sure that I do that over my little work surface as well. Again, just trying to preserve as much of this material as I can so that nothing goes to waste. Now these little stems right here, these aren't really something that I would use for a tea or anything of that sort, but they can still be useful. This is something that can definitely be used in like an incense blend or something that you're going to burn. They can be added to like a smudge stick or something of that sort, just to give that a little more body, something a little more sturdy. Anything like non-edible, basically, you can use these. You can think of these as sort of like the bones of the plant. This is the body, this is the bones. So it can still be used. I usually don't have very many uses for these, simply because I have so much of the plant that I don't need to salvage every little last bit. So a lot of the time this will go into my compost, but if you don't have very much of the plant and you need to salvage every little last bit, definitely you can still use these just for non-edible uses. So. But yeah, fairly simple process. Again, much like the harvesting, this is something that will kind of fill your space with the aroma of the plant. So be prepared for that. A few little stems sticking there. I try not to garble too many herbs in a day, just because otherwise I will have that big cloud of conflicting aromas all throughout my house. And it has, in fact, like, sometimes given me a headache. Like if I do spearmint and peppermint and lemon balm and like all these and lavender all at once, I gave myself a headache one day doing that. Like I garbled so many herbs in one day that I was like, oh. So be warned about that. This one's very woody as well. So, and again, that's the whole point of this process, is to remove these little bits that do not serve us. Sometimes the little stems at the end will break off, and those are the ones that I'm pulling out right now. There we go. And as you can see, like, I've already nearly filled that jar just from that one bundle. So a little bit of this goes a pretty long way. You don't need to have like huge amounts of these herbs. And this one jar, this is a good sized jar. This is nearly a year's supply for me. I say nearly because I do have kids that like to make teas out of my plants. And I've always told them, like, if it's on that shelf, it's okay to use. I have other plants that are not on that shelf that they are not allowed to use. Things like my mugwort. But everything that's on that shelf, the kids know it is safe for them and they can mix and match it as they see fit. I have one of my daughters in particular who really, really likes to make her own little blends. And she's the one who typically empties out my cupboard. There we go. So I could probably, like, if I really wanted to, I could pack that down and probably get another bundle in there, and I probably will, just to make sure that I have enough. But as you can see, that's a good amount of material right there. And then the last little bit, we're just going to clean up here. Salvage all those little bits. And there are a few little pieces, although there are some stems here on my little cookie sheet. Just tap that down into the corner, and then, come on, into the jar you go. There we go. Waste not, want not. So there's my spearmint right there, garbled and ready to use. And like I said, when I want to actually use this in a tea, I would just take out whatever quantity I saw fit, process it in my little mortar and pestle that I have up on the top shelf of my rack there, and then use it as needed. So, can't think of anything else to say about this topic, honestly. I think I've covered all the basics. If you think of anything that I missed that you have questions on, then absolutely, by all means, post in the comments. I'm always happy to help as best I can. I don't have all the answers, but I have some. And I'm happy to share what I do know. So, other than that, I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you again soon.